Now let's have a little chat about money. Not the stressful, bill-paying kind, oh no. I'm talking about lovely, shiny, historical money. The kind you can hold in your hand. Long before we were tapping our phones and cards, Ireland had a fascinating story with its coins. Picture this. It's the year 997. Dublin is a bustling, slightly chaotic Viking town. And a Viking king, a chap named Sitrick Silkbeard, has a brilliant idea. He decides, you know what this place needs? Its own money. And just like that, the very first Irish coins were made. They were little silver pennies, and they were a huge deal. It was like Ireland getting its first ever credit card, a sign that it was a proper player in the world. Before Sitrick and his silver pennies, things were a bit all over the place. People used all sorts of foreign coins. Imagine rummaging through your purse and finding coins from England, France, and maybe even some from faraway lands in the Middle East. It must have been a right old jumble. Using these foreign coins was fine, I suppose, but it wasn't very Irish. Having your own coins, with your own king's head on them, was a statement. It said, we're here, we're organized, and we know how to make our own shiny things, thank you very much. These first coins were based on English pennies, but they had a special Irish flair. So these Viking pennies started popping up all over the place. They had a simple design, usually a picture of the king looking very serious on one side and a cross on the other. They weren't exactly works of art, mind you. Some of them looked like the king had been drawn by a child after a bit too much sugar. But they did the job. They allowed people to trade more easily. You could buy your sheep, your bread, or maybe a nice new axe without having to argue about what a Roman coin was worth. It was the beginning of a proper money system for the island, all thanks to those rather stylish if slightly aggressive Vikings. Of course, these coins didn't just stay in Ireland. Oh no, they were little travelers. Archaeologists have found Sitrick's pennies in places like Russia and Scandinavia. It shows you how connected everyone was, even back then. Your little bit of silver from Dublin could end up in the pocket of a trader 1,000 miles away. It's a bit like your holiday euro ending up in a jar in some stranger's house in Berlin. These coins tell a story of trade, power, and Ireland stepping onto the world stage. It all started with a Viking king who wanted his face on a bit of silver. And who can blame him, really? Fast forward a couple of hundred years, and the Normans have arrived. They came over with their big castles, their fancy French accents, and of course, their own ideas about money. When King John, who you might remember as the baddie from the Robin Hood stories, became Lord of Ireland, he decided things needed a change. He wanted his own coins, naturally. So, around the year 1200, a new set of Irish coins appeared. These were also silver pennies, but they had a different look. On one side, you had the king's head inside a triangle. It was all very geometric and symbolic. He looked a bit like he was peeking out of a tent, bless him. These new Norman coins were minted in places like Dublin, Waterford, and Limerick. It was a proper operation. The triangle design was quite clever, really. It was meant to show the English crown's power over the three main parts of Norman Ireland. On the other side of the coin was a cross, which was pretty standard for the time. This cross had a practical purpose too. If you needed to pay for something that cost half a penny, you could literally cut the coin in half along the lines of the cross, or into quarters for a farthing. Imagine doing that with a euro today. You'd get some very funny looks, I can tell you. Now, whenever you have lovely new money, you also get some very naughty people who want to make their own versions. Forgery became a massive problem in medieval Ireland. You had chaps melting down good coins and mixing the silver with cheaper metals, like copper, to make more coins for themselves. These fakes, or crocards and pollards as they were called, flooded the market. It caused chaos. You'd go to buy a loaf of bread and the baker would bite your coin to see if it was real. It was a time of great suspicion. The government had to keep making new laws and cracking down on the forgers, but it was like a game of whack-a-mole. This money mess went on for centuries. Different kings came and went, and each one fiddled with the coins a bit. They changed the weight, the amount of silver, and the designs. Sometimes they made special coins just for Ireland that were worth less than the English versions, which didn't go down very well, as you can imagine. It was a constant struggle to keep the money stable and trustworthy. The story of medieval Irish coins isn't just about kings and silver. It's about the everyday challenge of trying to make sure the penny in your pocket was actually worth a penny. It was a real medieval money mess. Right, let's move on to a juicier bit of history. Enter the Tudors. Big dresses, big personalities, and big changes for Irish money. When Henry VIII was on the throne, he had a real bee in his bonnet about Ireland. He wanted everyone to know he was in charge. So what did he do? He put a harp on the Irish coins. This was a stroke of genius, really. The harp was already a famous symbol of Ireland, and by putting it on the money, Henry was basically saying, "See this? Ireland, it's mine." The first harp coins appeared around 1534, and they were a massive hit. The design was so popular that the harp has stayed on Irish coins in one form or another ever since. These Tudor coins were often quite beautiful, but they were also part of a clever and slightly sneaky political game. Queen Elizabeth I, for example, issued coins for Ireland that were made of much less silver than the English ones. They looked the part, but they weren't worth as much. This was a way of controlling the Irish economy and, let's be honest, making a tidy profit for the English crown. People weren't stupid. They knew they were getting a raw deal. They called it base money, which was a polite way of saying it was a bit rubbish. But they had no choice but to use it. It was another chapter in the long, complicated story of money and power between the two islands. Then came the Stuarts, and things got even more dramatic. The 1600s were a time of war and rebellion in Ireland. During these conflicts, all sorts of weird and wonderful emergency money appeared. When the official mints couldn't work, local lords and military leaders would just make their own. They would stamp bits of silver plate or even scrap metal with a value and use it to pay their soldiers. One of the most famous examples is the gun money issued by King James II during his campaign in Ireland. It was made from melted down cannons, bells, and anything else they could get their hands on. It was a promise to pay in proper silver later, if he won the war. He didn't, which was a bit awkward for anyone left holding a pile of brass coins. This era also saw the rise of regional mints again, but they were often short-lived. The main minting was still controlled from Dublin, under the watchful eye of the English crown. The harp remained the star of the show, but the quality of the coins went up and down like a yo-yo, depending on who was in charge and whether there was a war on. It was a turbulent time, and the coins reflect that perfectly. They are little metal snapshots of a period filled with grand ambitions, political plotting, and the constant struggle for control. And at the heart of it all was that beautiful, simple harp. So after all that drama with harps and gun money, we get to the 1800s, and things take a rather sad turn for Irish coins. In 1801, the Act of Union was passed. This officially made Ireland part of the United Kingdom. It was a huge political change, and it had a big impact on everything, including the cash in people's pockets. For a little while, the Irish Mint in Dublin kept going, making its own pennies and halfpennies. They still had the harp on one side, but now they had the head of the British monarch, King George IV, on the other. It was a sort of monetary marriage, a blend of the two identities. But this arrangement didn't last long. The powers that be in London decided it was all a bit messy having two different currencies. They wanted everything to be streamlined and simple. So in 1826, a decision was made that sent a shockwave through Ireland. The Irish Mint was closed down, just like that. After centuries of making its own unique coins, from the Vikings to the Georges, the Irish Mint shut its doors for good. From that point on, Ireland would use the same currency as the rest of Great Britain and Ireland. The Irish pound was officially no more. For the next 100 years, the coins used in Ireland were exactly the same as the ones used in England, Scotland, and Wales. They were British sterling. If you were in Cork or in Cornwall, the penny in your hand was identical. It featured the British monarch on the front and symbols like Britannia on the back. The harp, that proud symbol of Ireland that had graced its coins for 300 years, vanished completely from circulation. It was a quiet but powerful symbol of the change in Ireland's status. The country had lost its monetary independence. For ordinary people, life went on. They used the new coins to buy their groceries and pay their rent. But for those who cared about Irish identity and history, it was a sore point. The absence of a national coinage was a constant reminder that Ireland was no longer governing its own affairs. It was as if a little piece of the nation's soul had been tucked away in a drawer. Little did they know that this was just a pause in the story. The desire for a truly Irish currency was simmering away, waiting for the right moment to boil over. And that moment, when it came, would bring some of the most beautiful coins the world has ever seen. And now for my favorite part of the story. After the War of Independence and the creation of the Irish Free State in 1922, Ireland was its own boss again. And one of the first things the new government wanted was its own money. It was a huge symbol of independence. No more British kings on their coins. But what should they put on them instead? They didn't want to put politicians on them. Can you imagine the arguments? So they formed a special committee to decide. And who did they get to head this committee? None other than the famous poet W.B. Yeats, a poet in charge of coins. How brilliant is that? Yeats and his committee had a wonderful idea. They decided the new coins should celebrate Ireland's natural wealth, its agriculture, and its wildlife. They wanted designs that were beautiful, modern, and uniquely Irish. So they launched a competition and invited artists from all over Europe to submit their ideas. The winner was an English artist, Percy Metcalfe. His designs were absolutely stunning. Instead of stern-looking rulers, the new Irish coins would feature a wonderful collection of animals. It was a genius move. The coins were first issued in 1928, and people fell in love with them immediately. Each coin had its own special animal. The half-crown, the biggest coin, had a magnificent horse. The florin had a leaping salmon, a symbol of wisdom. The shilling featured a powerful bull. The sixpence had an elegant Irish wolfhound, and the threepence had a hare poised to run. Even the smallest coins were little works of art. The penny had a hen with her chicks. The halfpenny had a pig with her piglets. And the tiny farthing featured a woodcock in flight. On the other side of every coin was the Irish harp, making its triumphant return after 100 years in exile. It was like having a little farmyard in your pocket. These coins were more than just money. They were a statement of national pride. They represented a new, peaceful, and forward-looking Ireland. An Ireland that was connected to its land and its heritage. The designs were so beloved that they were kept for over 60 years, with only very minor changes. People all over the world admired them. Even today, they are considered by many to be among the most beautiful coin designs of the 20th century. It just goes to show what can happen when you let a poet have a say in things. You get money that isn't just for spending, but for admiring too. Time moves on and countries change. The Irish Free State, or Saoirseat Éireann as it said on those lovely animal coins, also evolved. In 1937, Ireland adopted a new constitution and a new name. It became simply Éire, the Irish word for Ireland. And when the name of the country changes, the name on the money has to change too. So from 1938 onwards, the inscription on the coins was updated. The words Saoirseat Éireann were replaced with Éire. It was a small change, but a very significant one. It was another step on the journey towards becoming a full republic. The Second World War brought other changes, not just of words, but of metal. Nickel and bronze, the metals used for some of the coins, were needed for the war effort. You can't be making pennies when you need the metal for bullets and shells. So the Irish government had to get creative. They stopped making pure nickel coins for a while. After the war, new materials were used. The silver coins, the half-crown, florin, and shilling were replaced with coins made from cupronickel, a mixture of copper and nickel. They looked silvery, but they didn't have the same weight or value in metal. It was a practical change that was happening all over the world as silver became more expensive. As the decades went by, some of the smaller coins began to feel a bit old-fashioned. Inflation meant that the smallest coin, the farthing, with its lovely woodcock design, was worth less and less. By the 1960s, it cost more to make a farthing than the coin was actually worth. You couldn't really buy anything with it. You'd probably get one in your change and it would just get lost in the fluff at the bottom of your pocket. So, with a little bit of sadness, the farthing was officially withdrawn from circulation in 1966. It was the end of an era for the tiny bird coin. The halfpenny, with the mother pig and her piglets, followed a few years later. These changes were all part of the natural life cycle of a currency. As the economy changes, the coins have to adapt. But through all these tweaks, the new name, the different metals, the disappearance of the small change, the core designs remained. The horse, the salmon, the bull, and all the other animals continued to jingle in the pockets of the Irish people. They were a comforting and familiar presence, a link between the new republic and the ideals of the Free State. They were, and still are, a beautiful symbol of the nation. Now let's talk about a very special coin, a real one-off. In 1966, Ireland was preparing to mark a huge event in its history, the 50th anniversary of the 1916 Easter Rising. This was the rebellion that kick-started the whole journey to independence. The government wanted to do something memorable to commemorate it, something that everyone in the country could be a part of. They decided to issue a brand new, special coin. This wasn't going to be just another penny or shilling. Oh no, this was going to be the first, and as it turned out, the only Irish 10-shilling coin ever made. The design of this coin was hugely important. It had to capture the spirit of the Rising. The job of designing it was given to a man named T. Hugh Paget. On one side, of course, was the traditional Irish harp, but on the other side, he created a truly powerful image. It was a depiction of Cuchulainn, the great hero from Irish mythology. He is shown dying, tied to a stone, with a raven on his shoulder. This image was based on a famous statue that stands in the General Post Office in Dublin, the very headquarters of the 1916 rebels. It was a symbol of heroic sacrifice and defiance. It was perfect. The coin itself was a big, chunky thing. It was much larger than the other coins in circulation and was made of 83.3% silver. It felt important when you held it. When it was released, it caused a massive stir. People queued up at banks all over the country to get one. It was a piece of history you could own. For many families, it became a treasured keepsake, passed down through the generations. It wasn't really meant for spending, although it was legal tender. It was a memento, a silver disc that connected the Ireland of 1966 with the heroes of 1916. Interestingly, the coin became so popular that it created a little problem. So many people kept them as souvenirs that they didn't really circulate as money. This is why you don't often find them in worn condition. Most were put away safely in a drawer almost immediately. There's also a little secret about this coin. A tiny number of them were supposedly minted with the designer's initials on them, but most were not. Finding one of those is like finding a golden ticket. The 1966 10-shilling piece remains one of Ireland's most famous and beloved coins, a powerful tribute to a pivotal moment in the nation's story. Hold on to your hats, because things are about to get a bit mathematical, but in a fun way, I promise. For centuries, Irish and British money had been a bit bonkers. There were 12 pennies in a shilling and 20 shillings in a pound. You had to be a genius at mental arithmetic to go shopping. But in the 1960s, a new idea was sweeping the world: decimalization, counting in tens. It was so much simpler. The Irish government decided it was time to join the party. So, on the 15th of February 1971, known as Decimal Day, Ireland's money system changed forever. This was a massive operation. The old pounds, shillings, and pence were out, and a new decimal pound made up of 100 new pence was in. To get everyone ready, there was a huge public information campaign. There were jingles on the radio, adverts on the telly, and posters everywhere. It was a bit like learning a new language. People had to get used to the idea of a new penny. To make the switch smoother, some of the new coins were introduced a few years early. The new 5 pence and 10 pence coins were the same size and value as the old shilling and florin, so people could get used to them. The new decimal coins needed new designs. The harp, of course, stayed put. It was non-negotiable. But the beloved farmyard animals were retired. It was a sad day for the horse and the bull. In their place came a new set of designs inspired by ancient Celtic art from old Irish manuscripts, like the Book of Kells. The artist, Gabriel Hayes, created beautiful, intricate patterns of birds and other creatures. The halfpenny had an ornamental bird, the penny had a bird in a Celtic knot pattern, and so on. The 20 pence coin, introduced later in 1986, featured a horse, a little nod to the old half-crown. These designs were modern, yet deeply rooted in Ireland's ancient past. Then, just as everyone had finally gotten the hang of the decimal coins, another huge change came along: the euro. On the 1st of January 2002, Ireland, along with 11 other European countries, adopted the euro as its new currency. The Irish pound, the punt, was gone for good. There was a changeover period where you could use both pounds and euros, which was utterly confusing for everyone. But soon, the familiar Celtic bird coins were replaced by euros and cents. Ireland chose, you guessed it, the harp for the national side of its euro coins. It's the symbol that just keeps on giving. And so, Ireland's unique coinage journey came to an end as it joined the great big family of the Eurozone. Now for the bit that gets everyone excited: the treasure hunt. While most old Irish coins are lovely to look at, some of them are incredibly rare and valuable. Finding one in your granny's old biscuit tin could be a very happy day indeed. Coin collectors, or numismatists, as they like to be called, will pay a fortune for the right ones. One of the most famous and sought-after rarities is a coin that almost nobody has ever seen: the 1943 florin. In 1943, the Mint in London produced a batch of Irish florins and half-crowns. But there was a problem. The florin, the 2-shilling coin, was still made of pure nickel. Remember how we said nickel was needed for the war? Well, by 1943 it was incredibly scarce. The entire batch of 1943 florins, and the half-crowns too, were supposed to have been melted down before they ever left the mint. The official records say none were ever issued, but, and this is where it gets exciting, it seems a tiny handful, maybe 2 or 3, somehow escaped. They slipped out. Finding a 1943 Irish florin today would be the holy grail for a collector. It would be worth tens of thousands of euros. It's the stuff of legend, a ghost coin that may or may not be hiding in an attic somewhere. Another great prize for collectors are the 1928 proof sets. When the beautiful new animal coins were first designed, the mint produced a small number of special sets for collectors and VIPs. These proof coins were struck using highly polished dies, so they have a stunning, mirror-like finish and incredibly sharp details. They were presented in green leatherette cases. Only 6,001 of these sets were ever made. Today, a complete 1928 proof set in good condition is worth a small fortune. It's the original, perfect version of one of the world's most beautiful coinages. There are other little rarities to look out for too. The 1938 penny is surprisingly scarce, as are the 1985 20 pence and the 1986 halfpenny. But the real star is the 1985 20 pence coin. It was a trial coin, and only about 500 were made to test out vending machines. They were supposed to be returned and destroyed, but some escaped into the wild. Because it looks so much like the common 1986 version, people spent them without realizing. Today, they are worth thousands. So have a look down the back of the sofa. You just never know what treasures from Ireland's amazing coinage journey you might find. You could be sitting on a fortune.